It is already March 1st. Wow. Why is Vandy going to win 6 games? You better buckle up. I'm about to tell you. Let's go.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. On today's episode, we explore what makes me believe that Vandy is going bowling. The quarterback situation, the fact that the defense will actually have an identity under Clark Lee. Those are a couple things that we'll discuss. Lastly, Vandy Baseball is traveling to the Houston Astros Foundation College Classic. They'll face off against Louisville, Houston, and the Longhorns of Texas. So how can they come out undefeated? We will discuss. Thank you for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Nissan. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. So Vandy Football. I made a pretty bold claim yesterday, and I said that Vandy Football was going to go bowling. I said they had to find 6 wins. I called my shot, and I'm going to stick to it. I got quite the response on the social media today. A lot of people kind of behind me. Some people think I'm smoking crack, and there's some people kind of in between those two sentiments. So I told you where you were going to find the wins yesterday to make it full circle. I'm going to tell you why. And the first reason why is the quarterback situation. And I know what you're thinking. You lose all your quarterbacks. You had some pretty talented ones on the roster last year, Ken Seals Jr., AJ Swan, and forget the other one. All right, because he didn't play much. But those two at least got significant playing time. Ken Seals was arguably the best one we had. And I get probably why you think that quarterback situation is not going to matter. But I think it is going to matter because the two quarterbacks that I've broken down, Diego Pavia and Nate Johnson. Also, there's Nate Berlowitz, who's coming in for New Mexico State as a transfer as well. And some limited action, he actually looked really, really good. And then there's a pair of freshmen coming in from Chattanooga, Whit Muschamp and St. Hilaire from Macaulay. So 5 really good quarterbacks on the roster. I think it's really going to come down to just 2 guys. And the reason why I think the quarterback situation is going to be great is that I think I alluded to it a little bit yesterday, and I've alluded to it before. I think you're going to have, no matter who they pick, I think you're going to have a really good marriage between the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. And with that, because I think Tim Beck is somebody who's going to play to his quarterback strength. I mean, that's why he was successful at New Mexico State. He was successful at, as successful as you could be for a rising division FBS program in Coastal Carolina, who had recently made the jump from FCS to FBS with Tim Beck as head coach. So I think he's somebody that kind of understands that, hey, I've got to play to my quarterback strengths, and if I don't, it's not going to go well, because you can't. Coaches that try to force their system into a quarterback usually don't have the same results, because a lot of times what they want to do and what the quarterback is good at oftentimes is not the same thing. So when you try to do that and you try to make them run your system, they often don't understand your checks. They don't understand the way you want them to do things, and they don't learn the progression exactly as it probably should be if it's your scheme. Now, if it's a fit and you've got somebody that aligns with your scheme and it's all a good good timing, good marriage. Like I think that's what Mike Leach had run into, where he recruited to his system. He recruited fits for his system. And I think that's why he was widely successful, because he had really good quarterback play, because they understood and they thrived in the things that that are most important in his system. Same with Tim Beck. With Tim Beck's system, you don't necessarily need a superstar. I mean, it'd be great to have a superstar. I don't think you'll turn one down, but guys like Diego Pavia, guys like Nate Johnson, like athletic, tough quarterbacks that have accuracy and can do a lot of things dynamically, are guys that will thrive in this system. Nate Berlowitz is very, very similar to Diego Pavia, and then you have St. Hilaire and Muschamp also as freshmen that are going to learn, that are in the pipeline, that can very, very, very easily make a run for this job in the future, in the very near future. So the quarterback situation, I feel like, is in really, really good shape, because you have a good scheme fit. And what Vandy needed to do scheme-wise, they needed to find an offensive coordinator. And this kind of goes into like coordinator, scheme, quarterback. It's all circular, right? It all kind of plays into it, right? You can't have a good quarterback without a good coordinator. You can't have a good coordinator without a good scheme. You can't have a good scheme without a good quarterback. And it's just a cycle. And with that, I think with Vandy, they have to have an identity, and Tim Beck brings an identity to this program, and that identity is going to be further illustrated by the quarterback, no matter if it's Pavia or Nate Johnson. And what I really like about these two, and I've spent episode after episode breaking down the differences in these two guys, but I've never really discussed the similarities. And the similarities are that these two are extremely competitive, tough, really good runners, really just guys that get after it, guys that want to win, guys that are really good leaders. And I think both of them, I think either one of these two, because honestly, it's going to be between those two. Unfortunately for Berlowitz, Muschamp, and St. Hilaire, it's a Pavia versus Johnson race this year. But both of those guys really have good leadership skills, and I feel like they could get a lot of guys to follow them, get their teammates to follow them, get the receivers and the offensive line to buy in to what they're doing within the scheme. Like, they've got to make plays, they've got to digest. And Pavia is an expert at the scheme. Nate Johnson is somebody that I think with his skill set could fit right in, no problem. And he has the entire spring to himself. So there's some advantages to both. And when you have a situation like that, where you have two guys that you really like, that okay, I know exactly what they're good at. I know exactly how what they thrive at, what they don't thrive at. I'm going to put them in situations as much as I possibly can, because football is an imperfect sport. I'm going to put them in situations that they're going to be successful, or they have the best chance to be successful. And did not feel that last year. Watching this Vandy team, there was no identity. There was no, I think the coordinator was just like, okay, I feel like this play would work against this. I feel like he was more scheme-based, more so than fitting your quarterback, or fitting the scheme to your quarterback, I should say. He was more so of like, okay, I think these plays would work against this defense. We need to run these plays. And didn't think about the fact that, well, you're not creating any sort of deception. You're not creating any sort of ways to have your quarterback impact the game, whether with his legs or through the RPO schemes. You're not impacting the game like you should. You're not figuring out ways to allow your quarterback to check into certain things. You're not allowing your quarterback to get those guys involved, like Will Shepard and Jaden McGowan and London Humphreys, as much as they should have. Now, they made some plays, but at 2-10, they didn't make enough plays. And it goes down to just the fact that the offense just was not on the field very much. And they couldn't get anything going. They had no identity. They had no quarterback play. Quarterback situation was terrible, and the coordinator situation was terrible. And when both of those things are terrible, 2-10 happens. I think they hit a home run because the piece that they needed was like Vandy does not need to do things conventionally. They do not need to run what everybody else runs. I'm not saying they need to go as far as like doing the Navy triple option Paul Johnson stuff, but like they need to think a little bit differently. And they need to do things that aren't, they need to kind of, grab the best of this, grab the best of that, grab the best of this that fits, right? That's what they did in the transfer portal. They said, okay, we've got these quarterbacks that can throw really accurate, really good on the run, moving the pocket and intermediately. And we have guys, and they built their receiving core around really hammering those intermediate zones. Also, they're like, okay, we're going to have to take some shots. Whether we hit, even if we just hit 20% of them, that's going to be really good for our offense because it's going to force defenses to respect us down the field, and we're going to stretch defenses vertically, and this is going to be really good for our offense. And when your offense stays on the field, your defense is more fresh. And so the quarterback situation, I think, to make this thing full circle, because I said a lot of things, but to make this conversation full circle is the fact that you have two very mature quarterbacks, two very talented, competitive, tough quarterbacks that have accuracy and can really make a difference in a ball game. That's something Vandy's lacked. And you have a coordinator that knows what they're good at and that's going to call and put them in situations into things that they're good at. And so when you have those things all come together, that's a recipe for success. Now, depth might come into play. That's the only potential downfall. But your quarterback situation is going to be a very, very key factor in your quest for a bowl game. So Pavia, master of the offense, really tough. Nate Johnson, extremely explosive, dynamic, both of them accurate intermediately. Nate Johnson slightly better down the field. But I think they're in good shape with the quarterback situation no matter who they choose. I'm really excited to kind of see how that shakes out. So with the great offense comes great defense, and with Clark Lee running things, the defense is going to be much improved solely because A, they're probably going to be better rested, and B, because they're going to actually have an identity. We'll break that down more here in just a second. All right. We are presented by Nissan. That is correct. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The Nissan Rogue. That's right. It's a perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive. Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. This might be an infotainment show, now that I think about it. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. All right. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes, the Pathfinder and the Armada. Let's talk about the Armada. Will change what the Armada, the 24 Armada, will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture this. It's a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. You can't beat that. You can tow bigger and explore further in the 24 Armada. So take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Hey, Nissan, if you're listening to this, there's a guy that hosts the Locked On Vandy podcast in Nashville that needs a nice SUV. So just in case you're wondering. could use one. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2, Locked On Vandy Podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Thank you to the everydayers for making all of this possible. Couldn't do it without you. Couldn't enjoy this fun ride that we call the Locked On Vandy Podcast if you weren't available. So follow the show on all social media. We focus on X and Instagram at this moment at Locked On Vandy. You can follow me at Coach Burton36 as well. Pigskin Petey came out with a really nice article on Vanderbilt. You said he used a lot of my things for inspiration. A lot of this show's content for inspiration. So I appreciate the shout out, and I couldn't ask for better. So at Pigskin Petey, Petey, on X. So follow him, give him a good follow. He's very good at what he does. So check him out. But we talked about, we're talking about reasons why Vandy's going to find their 6 wins. I said they're going to beat Auburn. We're telling you why. The quarterback situation is going to be probably one of the main reasons, because with that, a lot of things are going to trickle down from there. And one of the things is going to be that the defense is going to be so much more improved, and so much more improved for 2 factors. A, they're going to be on the field less. That explanation takes care of itself. They're going to be fresh. 2, they're going to have an identity. Now, what does that mean, right? You're going to ask yourself, what does having an identity mean? What that means is that that Vanderbilt, their identity is going to be aggressive, stop the run, affect the passer. You have a plan. And there was times last year when I watched this Vandy team. There were times last year where I felt like when the defense got lined up, I kind of felt like they were just trying to figure it out as they were lining up, like like the panicked look around where if you see a face mask doing this, looking like this, it ain't good. If you're a quarterback and you see that over there, attack that guy. That's going to be your touchdown. They gave up so many big plays because I felt like they didn't have an identity. I felt like they didn't have something that, hey, when we need a play, we get in this coverage and we bring this pressure. That's an identity thing. Like, hey, it's coming. Stop it. Like Georgia has that. They had that mint front where they have the double edge pressures and things like that, where they have an identity of, hey, we're bringing pressure. LSU's defense is we're going to lock you down a corner and force you to beat us through the air. Alabama was that way. They're going to suffocate you and destroy your quarterback and stuff the run with their defensive line. That was our identity. There was teams like USC that had defense optional. That was their identity. I don't know what their new identity would be, but we'll see. So you got to have an identity. And I think Vanderbilt's going to have that. I think that's why Clark Lee made the changes, because he felt like they just were kind of all over the place. They were just calling plays and instead of having a system of the way they did things, the way they checked and the way they adjusted to different things and the way they brought pressure. I don't think they had a plan. I don't think they necessarily had a really good plan for that last year. It didn't seem like it is, at least. They probably did. I mean, I'm not saying they can't coach, but it just didn't seem like that it was there. And that's from the outside in. And so I don't know what the underlying issues were, but there was something there. And I think that a lot of that's going to change. I think Clark Lee has done a really good job of going to get some playmakers out of the portal with Corday Sindor and Zaylen Wood on the defensive line. You got your 2 corners, Marlon Jones and Colby Taylor, Randon Fontenette at safety, to add to Dante Carter who's going to be the top freshman coming in. He's going to be immediate impact. And then you got obviously CJ Taylor, who's going to be one of the superstars on that defense. That guy's a special type of player. So you're going to see a dynamic, aggressive, tough defense that's going to hit you. And if you're going to beat them, you're going to beat them. You're going to have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to allow you cheap big plays. That's going to be the identity. And that's what Clark Lee is striving at, because if you watch his Notre Dame stuff, they brought a lot of pressure. Sometimes they gave up big plays. Sometimes they got burned. But it wasn't for lack of trying. It wasn't for lack of effort. It was they just didn't quite get there one play. They maybe the opponent's offense just beat them on a play, caught them in a blitz, things like that. Like stuff like that happens to defenses every once in a while. But you could see the plan. You could see that those guys were moving. They were trying to create gap problems. They were trying to make better angles for themselves to get through and stop the run or pressure the passer. They were trying to, play coverage behind it. And if they didn't, there's some coverages where if their pressure didn't get home, their coverage was cooked. And so those are the risk plays. And so again, I think they're going to have a better plan. I think they're going to have better coordination between the front seven and the back four with coverages and pressures. So I think all of that just alone lends itself to you being able to have more success on that side of the ball. Not to mention the new playmakers you add. Langston Patterson is going to be also a mega stud. Haven't talked enough about him, the CPA products. So, and we'll do more on him, obviously. But this defense is going to be special, and they're going to be nasty. And so what that's going to look like, I'm not sure. But it does, again, will play a key factor in Vandy finding 6 wins. So, yeah, you never know. But baseball travels out to Texas for the Houston Astros College Classic. We're going to, that's an interesting deal. I think they can be successful. They're starting to find their groove a little bit. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. Stay with me. All right. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. So bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, wrapping up the show here on the Locked On Vandy podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen. As we wrap up, make sure you make plans to listen to Locked On SEC next. Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job breaking down everything in this wonderful conference. So Vandy's going to a bowl. Quarterback play and defense, man. The two biggest changes in the offseason, I think, are going to pay huge dividends to what they're trying to do. So, but we're going to turn our attention to baseball now. Baseball has seen some success this year. There were some games where some concerns had arisen, and you're looking at it like, okay, what does this mean? But I think they're starting to find some answers now. But they're going to continue to find some answers as they open up this classic here with Louisiana tonight. So it's going to be Carter Holton, who's 1-0 on the season. Absolutely was dealing in his first start against Gonzaga. He's going against LP Langvin, who's also been pretty effective. He's sitting at 1-0 with a 2.57 ERA. So this is, I don't know I don't know a hill of beans about LP Langvin, but Carter Holton, I think if he continues his run of success and if he continues to find command and be able to get his breaking ball going, which he has really, really good stuff, he's going to be, they're going to win that game. So you have Bryce Cunningham and Devin Futrell also pitching this weekend. Cunningham against Houston, and you've got Futrell against Texas. Now, what you have to understand about some of these games, like Houston and Texas are really good. Louisiana, I don't know a whole lot about them, but they're probably pretty good. So I think what you have to realize is this. You have 3 really good starters going this weekend. And if you're Bryce Cunningham especially, you're probably sitting there worried after watching Ethan McIlvain have success in his outings. J.D. Thompson, who was absolutely outstanding in his 2 starts. You have to be kind of wondering, all right, I've got to get a win under the books, and I've got to get my ERA down, and I've got to be effective out there. And these guys have now got to start thinking about, okay, now it's time for me to start conditioning my arm to go deep into some of these games, because our bullpen is a concern, because I'm not going to judge it based on just one game. It's a step in the right direction, and it's certainly a really, really good thing. And it's certainly a thing that if they continue, they're going to have some guys that they can go to in the bullpen to kind of help close out some of these games. But I think it's ever so important, and I know why he's doing it, but it is important to get your starters, conditioned to be able to go 6-7 innings. Like, they've got to get to a point where they can. If they can't, especially these weekend guys, if they can't consistently go 6 or 7, you're going to have to find somebody that can, because you can't always. Now, there's some situations where they just don't have their stuff, and that's pitching. I'm not talking about those situations, because every pitcher that's ever pitched in the game of baseball since 1889 to now has had days where they come to the park and they just don't have their stuff. And that's normal. I'm talking about somebody who can only go 3-4 innings. If you can only go 3 or 4 innings, you need to be a long reliever. Period. And I think it's important for these guys to learn how to go deep. And I think they are. Don't get me wrong. I think Tim Corbin's heading in that right direction. I'm not saying that he's not. I certainly can't question Tim Corbin too much, because he's had, a lot of success at Vandy. But, I think a key, especially for this team, I think for confidence sake, they have to be able to go deep into these games. Hitting wise, they have to, their approach at the plate has to be more disciplined. I think at times they get undisciplined and they swing at bad pitches. They get antsy, I think is the root cause of it. They get antsy, whether it's, they're hitting well and they just want to jump on the first thing that comes across the plate, or they get really tight and say, oh, okay, well, our pitchers aren't really pitching that well. We've got to score 8 runs. I've got to score 8 runs on this one at bat, and they start pressing a little bit. And so either one of those mindsets don't usually lead to a lot of hits, and not having a lot of hits leads to not having a lot of base runners. And we don't have a lot of base runners. It's hard to score runs. We don't have a lot of base runners, and when you don't score runs, it puts a lot of pressure on your pitching and your defense. Now they've got to make plays to keep the other team from scoring. And in college baseball, especially, people can hit. So the bats have got to be more consistent. I think that the approach at the plate has to be a little bit more disciplined as far as knowing when to jump on a pitcher and knowing when to back off and run the count up as best you can. You've got to know the difference between that, and you've got to go up there with confidence. Like, hey, it doesn't matter what I do. Our guy on the mound, I trust him. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to go out there and just swing it, man. And so when you have that kind of confidence, you start hitting the ball. And the games that they've played with that level of confidence, that level of discipline, ironically, have been wins and big wins, like the Indiana State game. That was a really good baseball team. They beat 20-4. Why did they do it? Great plate discipline. They had a 10th player with the wind, and they pitched well. They put it all together. They played a complete game. Complementary baseball. And when you can do that, more times than not, you're going to win. Sometimes the other team does it a little bit better than you, and they win. So no shame in that. So anyway, it's going to be a fun weekend matchup-wise for the baseball team. A little quick note there. SEC Media Days are going to be held in Dallas, Texas. And Clark Lee will be speaking on July 15th. So he'll be talking to the media, and the Vandy will be featured at Media Days. So that'll be a lot of fun as well. So we're going to send you off into the weekend. Hopefully you have a great weekend, a safe weekend. It's already March. Wow. Time is flying. So we hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Find us. We're the Locked On Vandy podcast. And let's do it, man. Until Monday, anchor down.